a multiple award-winning political journalist, covered politics in Ghana for 25 years and more, hosted Ghana's most long-standing political talk show for the last 23 years, Good Evening Ghana, BA LLB, University of Ghana, MSc Violence and Conflict Development, and all of this. He also went to SOAS as a Chevening scholar, and he also has a PR practice now. Paul, thanks for talking to us. Thanks for being on the show. Good morning.
Good morning, Bernard. Thank you very much. And good morning to everyone. It's a Tuesday morning, isn't it?
It's a fun, a few years ago, you were here in this seat doing Stop Press, and there was a Friday show as well. So you've come a long way. I like this book, and I'll tell you my verdict on the book, even though I haven't read the full book. So there were two books on Ghana's modern political history that I've read, Obed Asamoah and Kwame Nkrumah. So Obed is very big and very law. Kwame Nkrumah was more enjoyable and very juicy. I think you've blended the two in a very interesting way. So you have hardcore narration of what happened, the law, the judgments and everything, but it's also very gossipy. So it's something you can't put down. I don't know whether you set out deliberately to do that, but that's my verdict. I don't know what you think.
Well, we wanted to write the account, we wanted to be truthful, and we also wanted to make it interesting. Journalists and news reporters are storytellers. So that's why I call it the 77 stories told by Paul Adom-Otchere. So in telling the story, we add a bit of the tension, the movement, the anxieties, and we try and capture them in words, the anxieties, in a way that people can relate to it. I'm very happy that you like it.
And these are stories you either reported or lived through.
Yes, very much
so. Through your lens as a journalist.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
It must have been difficult. Okay, why did you choose this approach? Because you could have just said constitutional leadership in Ghana and then basically done some historical work. Why did you use the media and stories as your conduit for putting this out?
Because that is my work. That is my training. And I am trained and prepared to tell stories. So I am not a professor of political science or a professor of law, but I have sufficient acquaintance with these subjects to be able to apply them to the political stories that I cover. And that's what I wanted to bring out in stories.
Why is it important for us to have this angle? Because the Hansards are there, the laws are there. As a political journalist, you've covered parliament, you've covered the presidency, you've covered also the courts. And a lot of those things are already there. But in a way, you have some sort of insider information. So, for example, when it came to the selection of Alajete as speaker, it was reported widely. But there are so many things you write about that a lot of people don't know.
That's the purpose of books, and that's the purpose of these accounts. What I actually wanted to achieve also, I had done a film entitled From Gold Coast to Ghana, a glorious history of self-determination.
Yes.
Since I studied in the university, I've always been at pains to show the Ghanaian effort in the things that Ghana has achieved. So that the independence was a Ghanaian effort, and that's why I put the film. And this success of the Fourth Republic, I wanted this book to show that it's truly a Ghanaian effort. It's not so much that maybe international community or some people, it is the decisions of Ghanaians that could have made or break this Fourth Republic. The decisions of the political leaders, the decisions of the institutions that we have created, that this was not achieved by any external force. It was achieved by the ingenuity and the magnanimity of the Ghanaian leaders themselves. That the Ghanaian leaders could have taken Ghana into flames. And it is the Ghanaian leaders who have brought Ghana this way. And they have been able to do that with the support of chieftaincy. So if you look at the Yana story, you see a lot of the work of chieftaincy. If you look at the negotiations that have occurred, you see other people involved. The Catholic Bishops' Conference, all of that. So this Fourth Republic of 32 years that the whole of Africa is applauding, it is a Ghanaian effort. And I want the book to be celebrated.
Why 77?
Like well, that's an interesting aspect of it. The stories are actually 87. But we thought that 77 rhymes better. So we started at approaching 77. Then we were at 50. And the guys told me that, boss, are we going to get to 77? I said, I'm sure we would. One day we woke up, we were at 82.
Wow.
And they said, should we change the title? And I said, no, let's not change it. We spoke to marketing people and they thought we shouldn't change it. Just keep it 77.
And they are chronological.
That made it a bit easier, and I have to, even though I've not written his name in the book, I have to be very grateful to a Citi FM connection. Paul in Parliament was of immense help, and then also the press, the leader of the press corps in Parliament.
Okay.
He also was very instrumental. I'll call Nanatewe after our looking for Hansard, and as soon as I call him, he knew why I was calling him. He's very upset I didn't invite him to the book launch, but I have a copy for him. So we did that. So we go to Nanatewe and say we need the Hansard of this, even though we already know the story. I wanted to behave like an academic. So yes, we know the story. We can write it as a story, but we needed to back it. So we take the Hansard, and then sometimes we've looked at the Hansard and we've drilled down onto the actuals, and we have put all of that in. In terms of the court reporting, we have looked at the Supreme Court of Ghana law reports, and we have looked at how the law reports have reported the case. We have added our story to how the law reports have reported it, and we have presented it like that. So if you are a student of law, this is the correct, accurate account of how the law saw it, and then we add how the media reported it and what was the stories behind the scenes, what happened in between the time the court was adjourned and the time the verdict came out, and we put all of that together.
I need to say that as a journalist, my first proper election was 2004, but in 2000 I was a student on Radio Universe, so I found particularly informative your story 1 to like story 20ish, because they dealt with 92, 93, 94, a lot of things we heard about but didn't really understand. And you chose the campaign for voting for election 92 as your first story. Why is that an important starting point for this constitutional leadership? And why is that election the beginning of everything?
I think what was really the beginning was the court case about the political parties law. That's
the preamble. Yes,
that's where the real game started.
The introduction.
As soon as the ban on political parties was lifted, the political parties law was procured by the PNDC. The political parties law was very interesting because the PNDC were concerned, and apart from Obed Asamoah writing in his book, he told me in an interview, the PNDC was concerned that coming out as a new party, they will be overwhelmed by the existing parties, the UP tradition and the CPP tradition. They wanted to break that. So they said in the political parties law that no one can use a name of a political party that existed. Interestingly, Komla Gbedema went to court, and who did he hire as his lawyer? Nana Akufo-Addo, to go to court. And this was a very interesting case. So the case was heard in the morning. Everyone was expectant that the judge will come and say that there should be no law banning anybody from winning. But the judge came and said, the court lacks jurisdiction to rule on the matter. This was very interesting. So political parties were now left to find new names. So the NPP had to decide whether between the UP and the Progress Party, which name will resonate with Ghanaians, so they go closest to it. I think they decided on Progress Party, which was PP. So they said they are NPP.
And then they said National Patriotic. Before later it became New.
New Patriotic, yes. There was an argument between, I believe, I didn't put it in the book, but I think it's between Peter Ajete and Johnny Selby also, whether it should be National or New. Yes. It was Ajete when he became party chairman, insisted that it's a New Patriotic Party. Yes. And so the name stuck. So that was how. And then the CPP also chose other names.
So there was NRP.
All of that.
There was NIP.
Sort of reconnect with the CPP.
And then also PNC.
But the NPP was the most successful in doing that because Progress Party, PP,
it rhymes with the
NPP was okay. So the National Democratic Congress were satisfied with that. And then they took the NDC. And according to Obed Asamoah, they were able to go out around the country. And so that was how it started. Then came the campaign. The campaign was going to be interesting because after 10 years of banning politics, how were the opposition going to put themselves together to run a campaign, especially as the government party was running? Again, this was novel because Ghana had gone through that process before. In 1979, we had come to do a third Republican constitution after about 9 years off. But the ruling government of the time, the AFRC, did not constitute itself into a political party. So it was clearly different. They were the clear referees. Here was 1992, where the PNDC had constituted itself into a political party, and so the refereeing issue was going to be a problem. So that's why the campaign of 92 was important. And you see that the campaigns changed and changed and changed. So the first image of Ghana's political campaign in this Fourth Republic will show the government party having a lot of resources and the opposition party having no resources. We're all saddened by that when we used to watch campaigns of 96. But I'm so grateful to everybody in Ghana and the politics today. It doesn't show anymore.
It's become
opposition party is not broke anymore.
Boot for boot.
Yes, and that will become like America.
Yes.
But in our politics, we always saw opposition party, they don't have cars.
They didn't even have access to GBC.
But that's not the case anymore.
Changed,
well, having access to GBC is treated in the book. Where the famous case of the NPP and the GBC, again argued by Nana Akufo-Addo.
I was actually going to ask you a question that I noticed a couple of things. You spend a lot of time dealing with court cases. Is it because this democracy was almost forged in the courts? Because from the case you just referred to earlier, the one about the names of parties, to the J.J. Rawlings Rude Awakening to New Democracy, the 31st December Court case, to the Kwame Pianim case, to the GBC case. It's almost like every junction of this democracy, people have had to go to court to fight for a right that they believe they have, but which is not being granted to them.
Two things I'll say. This reliance upon the court was one of the best things that happened in the Fourth Republic. And it happened because of those 5 judges who are isolated for praise, who ruled in the 31st December case.
Justice Philip Archer.
Yes, Jeremy Francois, Akins, and Adade and others. Now, if they hadn't made that ruling, it would have been business as usual. Because 1992 had just come. The military power was marauding all over the place. No court could succumb the military power. And so everyone thought that, well, the soldiers are still there. This was the case that made everybody in the world know that there's something different happening in Ghana today. And that's why I think those judges should be immortalized. Now, because those judges made that decision, people were now confident to go to the court. Now, that coincided with the MPP excluding themselves from the first parliament of the Fourth Republic. Now, because they were not in parliament to challenge the things that were happening,
the court became the
bill, when the bill went to parliament, they would go to court and fight the bill in parliament. So that also made the courts very useful. In the end, the court continued. In one of my editorial stories, I say that the judiciary is the backbone of this thing. The court continued up until election petition. If Georgina Wood had not made the decision to put that election petition on television, Ghana may have gone elsewhere. If we were going to rely on people coming out of court to tell us what was happening, it would have been chaotic.
So that was a very prescient decision.
Yes.
And now it's quite normal.
It's quite
for
normal
court cases
now
to have Supreme Court.
So the judiciary have been, and who made the decisions and the judiciary? Ghanaian people. The first 5 judges of the 31st December, the subsequent chief justices. For instance, Justice Redu decided at some point that on matters of constitutional interpretation, all Supreme Court judges must sit. And these developments significantly helped to empower the constitutional arrangement and also to discourage military adventurers from trying to take over this thing. And again, the media, and that's why I spend time talking about the media, the presence of the media, the activities of the media, the proactiveness of the media. You don't, I say that in the book, when I went to Cote d'Ivoire to interview Laurent Gbagbo in the heat of the crisis, Kwesi Pratt and myself and Raymond Archer were shocked to find that they have only one radio station in 2010.
Can you imagine?
And that was the problem. That was the difference between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. In my MSc thesis, I wrote a thesis entitled The Role of Security Sector Governance in the Outcomes of Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. So I had assessed
You actually interviewed Alassane Ouattara.
Yes, I did.
In this studio in 2005-ish. I don't know if you recount that in the book.
I don't, but I remember that. I also interviewed Gilchrist Olympio on the day that Oyadema died.
Yes.
Yeah, so
you mean there are so many stories you left out?
There are things I left out.
Yeah, what I wanted to just remind listeners, we are talking to Paul Adom-Otchere, who's written a wonderful book, I should say, Africa's New Constitutional Leadership, 77 Stories That Define Ghana's Fourth Republic. We haven't even scratched the surface at all. Now, he's admitted that a lot of our Fourth Republican democracy was forged in the courts. But the other thing I noticed about the book is that you spend time talking about big personalities. So D.F. Annan is in the book, Alajete is in the book strongly. I see Kwame Pianim in the book. Of course, Nana Akufo-Addo is there, Rawlings is there, Mahama is there. And you intricately discuss these personalities without necessarily giving a chapter on them. So it's almost like the things they did and what they stood for. I suspect you have a lot of admiration for D.F. Annan and Alajete. Why?
Especially D.F. Annan first, certainly Alajete as well. But D.F. Annan in terms of the speakership, as it is, he's the only speaker who has done 2 terms in this Fourth Republic. And that's why we have 8 parliaments but 7 speakers. Now, Justice D.F. Annan started with the 1992 process. He was a big sounding board for the PNDC, if you read Obed and Kwame Ahoy. So he had come in with a responsibility to make sure that this ship of democracy doesn't sink. He gave himself that responsibility. As a former Court of Appeal judge and a former Democrat and a former UP member, he was insistent that this democracy must succeed. And it was him who had power over Rawlings to be able to manage the expectations of the military junta. And I think D.F. Annan did that super
excellently.
It is important that we have to build a monument for this man, put it in parliament, say the first speaker of the Fourth Republic. This guy was excellent. Imagine him, and if you compare to what has happened today, imagine him in the story that I put up about Kwame Pepra. Now, Rawlings had won a second-term election. The Rawlings people felt that the MPP had now come to parliament, and they knew that the MPP had come to frustrate them.
96.
Rawlings was told that your ministers will have to go and face vetting where J.H. Mensah and Akufo-Addo will be sitting there. And Rawlings said, no, I won't do that. We don't want to do that. These people are nation wreckers. They are going to frustrate our people. D.F. Annan was in the middle, needed to decide what to do.
Okay.
Rawlings sent, as he ought to do, a letter to the speaker saying that these people are going to be ministers. Now, J.H. Mensah and these people started hearing rumors that they were not going to subject themselves to vetting. So they were in the house when Kwame Pepra appeared. This is Rawlings, the president.
Yeah.
And somebody told J.H. Mensah that, look, Kwame Pepra has just come into the house to read the budget.
Without
vetting. Yes. His name has just come as Minister for
Finance.
And the majority leader had informed Parliament that they were retained ministers.
Yeah,
and
so
J.H. Mensah said, there's nothing like that. The Constitution is clear on it. The election has come, so the Rawlings' term has ended. He has won a new term. He needs to do things anew. Then J.H. Mensah wrote a simple letter, and sent it to the speaker that I have seen Mr. Kwame Pepra here. I hope that my writ before the Supreme Court, of which you have noticed, is not prejudiced by the activities of Parliament today. D.F. Annan wrote and said that, oh, don't worry about Kwame Pepra coming here. The Rawlings sent me the list so that Parliament will do its work. You have to also know, however, that in terms of Parliament, we will decide how we go about it. But he said, I agree with you that nothing should happen that should prejudice your rate. So Kwame Pepra cannot read the budget.
Wow.
This was
a seminal
major decision.
Wow.
Major decision. Only D.F. Annan could have done this. I don't even know how he explained to Rawlings that Kwame Pepra cannot read the budget. Now, if you consider what has happened today in Parliament, then you will see how
strong, because
magnanimous D.F. Annan is.
This is a dictator turned
Yes,
Democrat.
and this is a speaker with nearly a two-thirds majority. Nearly a two-thirds majority.
Yeah, because
so he could have done anything he wants. But he wrote to J.H. Mensah that I will stand this down. I agree with you that nothing should be done here that will because he was a court of appeal judge. He was sensitive to the authority of the Supreme Court. And that really helped. Kwame Pepra didn't read the budget. The MPP had their way. Parliament decided that the consideration in Article 78 must not necessarily be vetting. Parliament should decide what it is. Incidentally, when Ajete became Speaker, he put it in the standing orders. That prior approval means vetting. So today it means vetting.
So a lot of what we take for granted today, we needed courageous people
very.
You have some interesting things around the P/NDC time. I enjoyed who is Ekosfio Gabra. And your story 4, Fanti Confederacy edges out Spew from JJ's cabinet. I mean, and the story came quite early. You've interviewed Spew Gabra a lot of times. And is it true that he was seen as a threat even then by some of the people close to Rawlings in terms of his charisma and his sort of stature, that they didn't really want him to emerge that much because he seemed favored?
When the Constitution came, there was always tension among the PNDC and NDC people in terms of those who were NDC and those who were PNDC. There was a bit of tension over there. And among the PNDC, there were those who were UP, Obeda Samuel, Mama Idrisu, Alhaji Sifu Ali, and others. And those who were CPP, Johnny Hansen and the rest. Rawlings himself appeared more UP than CPP because of his father-in-law and his relationship with Buzia's wife and all of that. Rawlings appeared when perhaps his Achimota school background. He appeared more UP than. And so it appeared that he favored the UP people, PV or Bain.
Some of the strong guys in his cabinet were...
And all of them, a lot of them were UP. And they also ceded the chairmanship of the party to the UP group. Started with Isifu Ali, all the way to Dr. Kobeneje. These are all UP. Kobeneje was a PFP member of parliament for Victor Usu's party. Obeda Samuel, yes, all the chairman of the MPP, NDC, so it was as if the NDC chairmanship was ceded for the UP tradition. So that was the division in blocks. Spew Gabra came from outside and instantly was favored by Rawlings. Spew Gabra was beginning to look like the new effort. This is the new NDC. This is unblemished, untainted. He's not UP, he's not PNDC, he's not NDC. He's fresh, he's young, he's from the African Development Bank, he's JJ's toast. So the jealousy was rife. And I think Spew may not have noticed because he thought he was doing something for Ghana. He thought he was going to be great for Ghana. And everybody in Ghana must like it. But politics is not like that.
So some of his challenges later were probably because he didn't
understand this phrase that is very frightening, that in politics, your opponents are in the other party, but your enemies are in your own party.
Can you repeat
It's
that?
very frightening. In politics. Your opponents are in the other party, but your enemies are in your own party.
The enemy within.
Yes, because you see,
Wow.
if you and I are in the same party and we have similar characteristics, one of us will be Minister of Interior, one of us will not be. But the NDC person or the MPP person who is in the other party cannot be a minister in this government.
So he's your opponent.
He's your opponent.
But your enemy is
your enemy is the one you are competing
My
with
God.
for the position.
Wow.
But you are all for the same cause. But you are enemies of sorts. I think Ekospio perhaps didn't quite understand. But it was a loss to Ghana that Spio Gabra was not allowed to be a minister in the first term of President Rawlings.
Some names keep coming up in the MPP side that I thought was interesting. Reku Brobe's name keeps coming up in a lot of the things you discuss. Nyahota Maklo's name keeps coming up. And they've been consistent throughout. And it's not just radio issues. Everywhere they are there. I mean, how do you rate people like Tarzan and Nyaho and also Courage Kwashiga? Everywhere they are there in the MPP.
They did very well. I mean, I completely regret. I don't have the power and the opportunity to sort it out, but I completely regret the seemingly distant relationship that has occurred between Nana Akufo-Addo and Nyahota Maklo, for instance. I think that's very regrettable. These are two men who stood for democracy side by side. They worked so hard to get the MPP on. I'm not so sure what happened. Well, I know some of it, but it's beyond my pay grade to discuss it. I still go to Nyaho's house in Hacho and talk to him. And I think Akufo-Addo has been super successful. And that should have brought Nyaho back on track. But I'm not sure what happened. Reku Brobe is still at home. He was also a big tower in the early days, the revolution days. The thing that happened to Reku Brobe was the 2000. You know, because Akufo-Addo had that opportunity. When in 1998 he had lost the Sunyani Congress, people were telling him to step aside from the MPP and form his own party.
The one he lost to Kufuor.
Yes. In those days, it was thought that the MPP was dull, they are colloquial, they just talk English. They needed a firebrand. He was the firebrand. They had rejected him at the Congress in favor of the more conservative Kufuor. And people were telling Akufo-Addo, step aside. And I spoke to him in those days. And he said, there's no point. How is he going to explain to JB Dankwa that he left the party? So he was going to go back on the campaign trail and support Kufuor to win. He was the best campaigner in 2000 Akufo-Addo for Kufuor. And I think that's where he towers above Reku Brobe. Reku Brobe could not resist the temptation of leaving the party and to be able to form his UGM and to move. Eventually, he came back in the second round. I was the publicist for UGM, by the way.
Is it?
Yes, back in the day. So I would be in the bus with him across the country. No, because I like something he said. As a young person, he said something that completely surprised me. When I asked him that, Dr. Charles, you are forming this party. What's going to be the mantra of the party? He looked at me and said, listen, we are in the year 2000. Gold doesn't matter anymore. Diamond and bauxite don't matter. We are going to say growing people for Ghana's development. We're going to grow human beings.
This is long before it became a big thing.
And I thought, wow. I said, Charles, what can I do for you?
Wow.
He said, be my publicist. I said, no problem. So I was working at Joy FM. They were teasing me, hey, UGM. Every UGM story was me.
Dr. Reku
because
Brobe.
I understood what the guy said.
Wow.
That if those who could win the elections, those people who could win, the big names who could win the elections, were thinking like that. If Kufuor was thinking growing people for Ghana's development, if the NDC candidate Professor Mills was thinking like that, perhaps Ghana will go somewhere. I thought Reku Brobe had the best template to move this country forward. Of course, he didn't win the election. He was thought to have betrayed his party. He had too many problems with VRA, and then eventually
You did a lot on vice presidential candidates. My favorite was when you dealt with the Hamidu. Because again, many of us may not have known that he was being seriously considered. And what was interesting was how a media interview scuttled that with Tony Edu. I mean, you were at Joy FM at that time.
Yes.
I mean, in those days, the media were very plugged in to the political process because there weren't a lot and everybody was listening. It wasn't like today when you have all the social media. So if you have a big interview with Joshua Hamidu and Tony Edu in the studio, every serious person is listening. All right.
And Joy FM's front page program,
Kweku
Sechado's program, was the biggest at the time. Everyone was listening on Fridays.
I mean, how serious was that? After the Tony Edu attack on the guy, that was basically the end of his
I tell you something. It was one of my bosses at Joy FM, you know him, Samens, who after the interview told me that follow up on Tony Edu. After he left the studio, he said, I don't come. Follow up on Tony Edu. So I had a friend, you know him, Pori, who was doing his national service at the castle. So I asked him to check and tell me what happens. And he told me that Tony Edu arrived to a rousing welcome. Rousing welcome. And I said, wow. So we put it in a Joy FM story.
That Tornado.
That reports indicate that Tornado had arrived to the castle to a rousing.
Everybody was listening.
Tornado was Deputy Minister of Defense. And I went to his office the next day. The same day in the afternoon. I went there. He was sitting down, sipping on his beer. And he said, how did I do? I said, you know what you did, Minister. You know what you did.
Well, you need to get the book to read that.
That was a bombshell. I mean, so the story is that Hamidou came into the studio and argued with Tornado. Tornado came with an agenda, and Kweku Sechado was quite upset.
Tornado didn't know that Tony had an agenda.
Tornado started with, he was very belligerent.
Yes.
You are going to give me the same time. And Kweku said, calm down. Front page is a serious program. We don't do that. We'll give you the same time. Then he started looking at his watch. Then Hamidou spoke for 25 minutes. Then when he said, okay, now let me tell you, your guy spoke for 25 minutes, Mr. Sechado. I'm speaking for 25 minutes.
Yes.
Sechado said, go on, but I will interrupt you when I think I need to.
By the time he was done, the man was finished.
The time he was done, it was devastating. It was terrible. He rose the bones of the Ashantis, Afrifa.
It was deadly.
It was devastating.
Well, you need to get the book to read those juicy details. I just wanted to give one final story before I come to your conclusions. So I enjoy Kwame Pinim because as somebody who likes economics, there's a lot of people who feel that he's probably the best president Ghana never had because of his strong track record in business, his understanding of the economy, his Yale background, and of course his prison wounds. All right, so when you go to prison and come out, it's part. So he has high profile. And I remember reading the graphic front page, I think 96 or so. I think I was in SSS. But it was such a big deal. My father took the newspaper and clipped it. It's like, wow, Kwame Pinim cannot run for president. Everybody was worried. I didn't really understand it until I read what you wrote. So you lived through those times more with an understanding. How big was Kwame Pinim and how seminal was the judgment that he could not contest as president because he probably it was a big thing.
It was big because Rawlings didn't have a challenger. Rawlings didn't have a challenge. And I dare say that it was Kwame Pinim's campaign that gave the impetus to the Kumi Preko, that sort of grounded the Kumi Preko thing, because Kumi Preko had come before Kwame Pinim. And Kumi Preko was the first thing that shook Rawlings a little bit. Kumi Preko leadership had been by NPP and CPP, actually. Kweku Bakun was CPP, Freddie Blaze CPP, Kwesi Pratt CPP, Nyaho Tamaklo is NPP, but they are CPP ways of doing things. Akufo-Addo had started with CPP and he had become a UP much later on. He was a left-wing politician in his 20s. He was left-wing, and then he was admiring Trotsky and some of these Vladimir Lenin and all of these people.
Like
yes, so you had this group of people who had then taken Rawlings on in this major demonstration. Now, a lot of them were thinking that the demonstration momentum should be carried into the 1996 election.
So you need a candidate who can carry that fire.
Correct. They were sure that this MPP people, they called them old, they called them professors, they were not going to be able to do it. Then came Kwame Pinim, who had the resources.
Safwedu
Kofor, Zani Selby, Dubois.
The older group.
Yes, the younger people, Kwesi them thought that this guy is not going to do it. I mean, let's get somebody. So Kwame Pinim came out. And they were all coalescing around him, yes.
And yet he's a right.
He's a UP guy, and they coalesced around him. We didn't know him, but then he set out to campaign, and he was telling the people what he would do. And then Nyaho Tamaklo was the campaign manager for Kwame Pinim's campaign. And Nyaho coined the song after Nkrumah's song, Nkrumah Showboy. So Nyaho, Kwame Showboy, I want to see you, Kwame Pinim Showboy. Wow. And the thing was catching fire. And then Kwame Pinim's son married Rupert Murdoch's daughter.
Yes.
Around that time, Rupert Murdoch was the big media mogul. And Kwame Pinim held a press conference and said Murdoch had promised him a helicopter for the campaign to be able to trudge along the way Rawlings was doing with the military helicopter. So this was the first major threat. But we didn't also notice then as young boys that this perhaps was also a threat to the NPP, because the NPP is a conservative party. They were looking at Kwame Pinim as somebody who was overturning the agenda of sorts. So they were quite worried about Pinim's activities.
Which is why the leadership of the party did not wait for the case to finish.
They did not quite back him.
Yeah, they
did not quite back him.
Yeah,
and again, you have to speak about Akufo-Addo and Adjeti. Akufo-Addo was a lawyer for the NPP. Whilst he was with Alliance for Change, he felt himself loyal to the NPP. So he had to do the case for the NPP loyally. And the case for the NPP was that they were not quite interested in Kwame Pinim's problems with national security. Kwame Pinim should deal with his problems in court. And so they were going ahead with their Congress. And then Kwame Pinim went with an injunction to stop the Congress.
Because my matter will be determined.
Yes.
Wait for me at least. Give me a chance.
There was a conversation between, I believe, Courage Kwashiga and others, and Reku Brobe. And Reku Brobe really felt that if Kwame Penim had listened to him, he would have been president. Brobe's argument was that, Kwame, don't go to court. Let's win the MPP Congress. Become the flag bearer of the new patriotic party. Let's see whether now government can say you can't run. Then the whole Ghana will burn.
Hey, but that would have been... This is 96, bro.
This was Reku Brobe's angle. That Kwame, forget about this court. Kwame Penim was a peaceful man.
Which means that the Kwame case, Kwame Penim sort of either instigated it or was not.
Oh, I think they organized
it.
They
wanted to be sure.
They wanted to clarify that. Kwame himself wanted to clarify it. Reku Brobe felt that there's no point of clarifying. You are the most popular man. You are the Kwame show boy. You're going to win this Congress.
More popular than Kufuor.
Oh, by far. Oh, and by amazing distance. It's not.
Wow.
It was because of Kwame Penim that we believe Kufuor won. So in the end, when Kwame couldn't run, a decision had to be made. And I think that Deputy Chief of Staff Carlos von Brazil will corroborate the story. A decision had to be made. What do we deploy the strength and the energy that Kwame Penim has given us to?
Okay.
And again, Reku Brobe was instrumental. Let's deploy it in favor of J.
And what is interesting side stories? Kwame Penim, Kofi Annan were contemporaries who lived in the same area in Kumasi.
In Kumasi, yes. So these were the few of them. DK Osei, they were all in that neighborhood. Richard Anani.
Yes.
So they thought that let's deploy this Kwame Penim energy for J.A. Kufuor.
Wow.
So that was deployed for J.A. Kufuor in 1996. He won instantly. I dare say that if Kwame Penim had deployed those energies to another candidate, say Dubois, that candidate would have won.
So he was the star.
Kwame Penim was a big, huge, phenomenal star.
We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll wrap up on some of the recommendations. I mean, this is a new book, 77 Stories That Define Ghana's Fourth Republic. Paul Adom-Otchere, the author, is in studio giving us some insider details. We're talking to Paul Adom-Otchere, who's author of a new book, Africa's New Constitutional Leadership, 77 Stories That Defined Ghana's Fourth Republic. And listeners, this is almost 600 pages. You know, it's a fantastic work. So, where can people get this book? And did you make any recommendation? Because you can't give us 77 stories about our constitutional history and just leave it at that. Obviously, there should be one or two.
I have some verdicts at the end. I think it's page 580 or so. Yeah. It's called the editorial stories. Where
so this is your view.
Yeah, this is our verdict, the author's verdict on most of the things, and that's where we conclude. We make conclusions about personalities, about Kufuor, about Akufo-Addo, about other people, and we sort of justify why we are saying what we are saying.
Mm-hmm.
So those who get the book, if you look at. I believe it's page 528. It's editorial stories, and it begins with the Supreme Court, the backbone of Ghana's Fourth Republic, and then you have IMF stories and
the Galamsey phenomena, Bawumia.
Bawumia is the discovery of the Fourth Republic, and we say why we are saying that.
And the independent media, the Fourth Republic, and the dangers of fake news. You deal with that as well.
We deal with that.
Joy FM, Peace FM, Citi FM, Star FM, all of those coming through.
Yeah.
And then the Akufo-Addo, the most important politician of our Fourth Republic.
Yeah, the most impactful politician, and we analyze why we say that. So we do mobilization, demonstration, and influence, and campaign and elections, conciliatory politics, enhancing media plurality, expanding the franchise. We say that Akufo-Addo is leading on all of these categories. If you look at democracy, these are the pillars of democracy, and you look at how it has applied in Ghana's Fourth Republic, you will see that Akufo-Addo is being the most impactful in all of the areas. Conciliatory politics, for instance, we say he's the only politician who lost elections by 25,000 and accepted the verdict when 8 million people voted. That was very important. Enhancing media plurality, we talk about his work with statesmen, and especially the repeal of the criminal libel law. Expanding the franchise, we talk about the party elections. Akufo-Addo is the reason why we have 100,000 people voting in parties today, because in 2010 he decided that if the MPP was not going to expand the franchise, he will no longer contest for the presidency, because he doesn't see why 2,000 people...
Reducing the impact of a few super delegates.
That kind of thing. So he pulled out the super delegates, and NDC copied it.
NDC followed that as
Rawlings instructed NDC to copy it, that this is democracy. So that way, again...
You also described Kufuor as the most stabilizing factor and the anchor of the Fourth Republic. That's a big thing to say.
That is so, because Rawlings was able to stabilize the Fourth Republic by and large from 92 to 2000. But everyone was wondering, when the military man is not there, what will happen? This Kufuor comes in as a civilian, very similar to Buzia. Buzia had been overthrown 2.5 years. Liman had been overthrown 2.5 years. This is the first time we're having a proper civilian, as we say in law, civilian qua civilian, who is ruling and controlling the military. This is not a military man controlling the military.
It's a serious thing.
How was that going to happen? And Kufuor did a stupendous job in putting things together. He put his brother at defense first to start with. This is a medical doctor with a lot of temerity, maturity, and Adokufo did a sterling
And when
job.
he took over, we had more military rule than civilian rule.
And he needed to cross the first 4 years. He needed to deal with the Rawlings phenomenon, which was a threat, and he had to deal with it. And so Kufuor was the one who was able to bring civilian authority over military. And in this regard, I have to say the work that people like Dr. Bafo Ajimandua did to support Kufuor in that regard, and CDD, Zimbabwe and others, the civil society, civil military relations, they did an excellent job. And so Kufuor became the anchor. And after Kufuor left, we were all confident that another civilian will be able to do it. And then came Professor Mills.
So Kufuor sort of set the template.
He set the template so well for us. How he changed IGPs, how he appointed the military commanders, how he managed the country. Prices were going up. The things that the military adventurers will use to do the coup, Kufuor dealt with it. Capitation grant quickly came in. National health insurance quickly came in to demonstrate that democracy is beneficial, because the military had this narrative that democracy is not beneficial. And that's how their coups have been popular. Kufuor was able to demonstrate for the first time that democracy can deliver something.
Which is why popular support for coups has remained low.
That's the point. So now nobody wants coups again. You go to campaign 2024 today, and I'm delighted to see NDC people with MPP people teasing each other. Nobody's fighting. Everybody is focused on election. We all know that one person will lose, one person will win. We will have another election in 4 years. We should attribute that to J.A. Kufuor's work.
Wonderful. Where can people get this book, Paul?
It's at the Citi Vidya bookshop. Vidya bookshop in Laboni and all around the country. And
near
then it's
Old Metro TV.
Yes, it will also be at the University of Ghana bookshop soon. Yeah.
So it's an amazing work.
It's there now, but we'll be putting it across. And for students, we'll be giving them discounts to buy. Once you have your student's ID card.
Wow.
For political science, we'll give them some. Philosophy, we'll give them some. Faculty of Law. I will ask Ransford Jampo to tell me. Ransford Jampo will tell. Ransford Jampo was 1 year my junior.
That's where you were.
Many people don't believe that.
So you were taught, were you taught by Okwe or by Dra or by
all of them? Okwe,
Jimabwedi.
All of them. Jimabwedi, yes.
All of them.
I was very lucky. I had. In our class, we had Professor Yakubu Saka, who had been Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for Liman, who was an Nkrumahist, and Professor Michael Kwe, who was a UP guy. Both of them would teach you the same topics. So that's how Professor Achuayi arranged political science. So political philosophy, Okwe will teach you, Dra will teach you the same thing.
So that you have a balance.
So when Okwe can say, what did Dra say? What did Yakubu Saka say? Then in the exams, you have Okwe section, you answer 2 questions from Okwe, 2 questions from Yakubu Saka. It was amazing. The same story, Yakubu Saka will give you the CPP angle, and the same story, Okwe will give you the UP angle. Now listen to this interesting thing. We had all grown up to know that in 1979, the UP was divided in Victor Uso and Pawuli. Yakubu Saka will convince you that the CPP was more divided, and he's right.
Is it?
Colonel Banasco was CPP. Most of the candidates were CPP. Okay. So CPP was about 4.
Amazing.
And he told the class that what is Michael Kwe talking about? We were more divided than they were, but we still beat them. And that was, I hope that in the future they can arrange political science like that, so that
Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for this work.
Have you voted?
No, you didn't do special voting. A lot of journalists didn't get onto the list.
I've never done special voting before.
You prefer to vote on the day,
yes,
so you can experience what the ordinary man is experiencing.
Vote on the day and hit the ground.
I hear you.
Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you,
it's
Paul.
a pleasure.